Like I watched all these other labels like just like come up like the same time I was doing my shit and like being like they're doing ads. That's so stupid. Why are they doing ads?
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Creep Records began as a record label started by Arik Victor in 1993 and has since expanded to a retail space, recording studio, and screen printing. The roots are in punk and hardcore, and they started off by putting out releases by bands like The Bouncing Souls, Plow United, Violent Society, All Else Failed, and more. The tales of the Creep House in Westchester have become that of legend, building a bond and community that lives and grows to this day. However, they have always been a label that puts out music that they truly love regardless of the genre. Thank you, Creep Records, for having that on your website, because it helps me with these intros that I honestly dread fucking doing, and it's nice to just read shit that someone's written so I don't have to make something up. Thank you. I heard of Creep Records when I was in my late teens because my friends found out about them through this band called Plow United. Plow would be on heavy rotation in my buddy Luch's silver Ford Probe when we would drive from Jefferson, New Jersey to either the Rockaway Mall, Jefferson Diner, Green Pond, Flipside Records, or the many shows that me and my friends attended. Alan Rappaport mentioned Creep Records in episode 24 of my podcast. If you want to go check that out, you should. It's a really funny fucking interview, and it gives you a nice insight into running a record store in New Jersey back then. And it made me think, like, well, shit, I need to interview Arik. So I did, and this is what we talk about. 80s hip-hop, NWA and 2 Live Crew, the scariness of metal shows, how he started recording bands, using a house party to get bands to record with him, creating Creep Records because of Plow United, getting taken advantage of by distributors, passing on the first bigwig release, his process for signing a band, why bands can't reunite after 20 years and make it a full-time gig, Tower Records having a positive effect on the music industry. That was actually really interesting to learn. Hopes of punk rock saving the country, opening his record store, and a ton more. Now, real quick, when I started this season, I called it Season 0 because I wanted to continue from the episode numbers going up. I didn't want to start from Season 2 and have it go to Episode 1. Now it looks really fucking confusing because I checked it out on the new interface of iTunes, and it was like I fucked up and had Digger as Episode 2 of Season 35, even though it's Episode 35, and all the new episodes were below Season 1 because I called it 0. So it's just called fucking Season 2, but it starts from Episode 30 or 29 because it's just a continuation of Season 1. Sorry for the confusion, but that's just the fucking way it is. So if you're looking at Season 2 and you're like, where's all the other 30 episodes? It doesn't exist. It's just a continuation. So there you go. Great. Before we begin, this week's episode is sponsored by my comic that you could check out on Instagram. It's called Daily Bread. And so if you go to yourdailybread, or just go to Your Daily Bread, B-R-E-D, on Instagram, you can find it. I do a daily comic there. I also have a book out if you want to buy it for someone for Christmas. That's great. It's called I'll Eventually Like Kids When They're Older. And it's a compilation of daily comics I've been drawing for about a year and uploading to Instagram. And this is a great gift for holidays and for the people that you love. So you should buy it, because I make a living off working for myself, and you think because if you work for yourself, you're rich, and that you're just fucking wrong. Sometimes there's months that go by where I don't know where money's coming from. So little things like this help me live. So please go support that if you'd like to. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can donate as little as $1 a month through Patreon by going to thiswasthescene.com and click on the button at the top of the page that says click here for bonus material. As a patron, you will get access to bonus material regularly, or that regular podcast subscribers do not. Or you could just do a one-time donation of whatever you'd like to by clicking the donate button, or you don't have to donate anything and just keep listening. I will constantly say this because I'm trying not to get sponsors, but if I do, then fuck it. I don't mind if I make $1 million off of this thing because, put a lot of time into it, and I would like to be able to buy things one day. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. It's like I reach out to bands that are in the scene, but I really reach out to people that, like, I'm just so fascinated by this stuff. So I'm trying to think of the people listening and what they want to hear, but it's like I selfishly just want to learn this shit myself.
Right. Okay.
So, but I try to think of it from the perspective of everyone from that time and talk from their perspective. But
Well,
cool.
I mean, in some part of my brain is still stuck there, so I'm fine.
Well, that's perfect. There's a lot of people I talk to where they're like, "Man, that was 20 years ago. It's so long." But
I know.
some people
I
really
know.
remember
I
this
don't know if
shit.
it's like a borderline alcoholism or what, but it's just I don't know, man. There's points where I just wake up and I'm like, man, like I feel like this was yesterday.
Yeah, I think you're probably one of the first people I've interviewed who has said that. So it'd be interesting how clear you remember stuff when we start talking. So I'm kind of excited even more now.
Probably. I mean, it's I don't know if it like falls back on like I talk to people now and they're so like far removed. I mean, we still do shows at the store and stuff, and like I see a lot of like younger people, and I still record bands and stuff like that. So I see like a lot of like what's happening in music.
Well,
There's
you're
just a
still in
certain
it.
type of Yeah,
You
yeah,
never
yeah.
detach. Like Creep Records is still going.
No, yeah.
You know.
No, I'm still in a shitty punk band and everything.
You're living the dream.
Well, or I have cancer, music cancer or something.
I bet you anything people
I
listening
mean,
to this, people listen to this, they always tell me they listen to this on the way to their job. You know, hopefully they
yeah,
like their job, but if they don't like it, they're probably thinking, man, that sounds so fucking cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll do my best to make sure that it doesn't sound cool.
Keep it fuck rock. Yeah,
Um,
man. So to start this off, as I do in every episode, and as I say it the same way in every episode, I want to go back to basically the beginning. You know, I like to really go back to, you know, obviously talk about the late '90s, but I want to go back for you personally when you were younger and really young, and find out what bands initially got you into music, and then what bands transitioned you into, like, you know, quote unquote punk rock.
sure. I grew up in Northeast Philly, so that's if you think about Philadelphia, that's sort of a negative place in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And
Why? Why was it? Why was it? Is it just bad
it was just
music, or?
like it was the shitty part of Philadelphia. Not necessarily dangerous, but just shitty.
Okay.
You know, people are really into sports and they hate everything. Um, I don't know how else to describe it.
I got you.
They really love sports and they literally hate everything other than that.
Okay.
So growing up, it was like the early 80s, and I guess like all we really listened to, it was like the beginning of MTV. But another thing that's sort of funny, like connected to that, is that Philadelphia didn't have cable, so we didn't have MTV. We had like these weird video. They would play videos like after Saturday Night Live or something, like in
Okay.
the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of like music that we couldn't just turn on MTV and be like, oh, what's cool? Like nobody
Oh
knew what
man,
was cool.
I remember that. That's when they would
Um,
release like Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Holy shit,
Exactly.
I forgot about that.
And an entire city of millions of people like didn't have cable. They would have like a satellite dish to get HBO or something like that.
Okay.
So I grew up like basically like the birth of like 80s hip hop. So like I grew up like buying like Run DMC records and like Fat Boys, Curtis Blow.
Okay.
We all wanted to be like in second grade. I wanted to be a rapper for sure.
That's awesome.
Even I'm very white, but I definitely wanted to be a rapper. And then when we got older, ironically, like when the Dead Milkmen were really popular in Philadelphia, which they were very, very popular. I remember my friend telling me like, I know everybody likes the Dead Milkmen, but they suck. and I would go over his house and we would listen to records, and he had all these cool records that are actually still cool, but he had like Suicidal Tendencies and DRI, Agent Orange, and the Smiths, like all the stuff that like now people would be like, this is like classic music, you know?
Oh yeah.
But it was all like had just come out, you know. and I remember like one record he played me in, like no bullshit, like when we were like 10 to 13, like all we really wanted to do was just get fucked up.
Yeah.
and not like in like a crazy drugged out kind of way. Like we just wanted to drink beer and like pretend to be older kids and like I don't know, just get fucked up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was there. Oh, yeah.
so he played me this yeah. So he played me this record. It was like the first Murphy's Law record, and like every song on it was like, you want to hang out with these guys, you know?
Yeah.
And we would just listen to it over and over again. And I was like, this is so much cooler than the Dead Milkmen. And so basically all we listened to was like Run DMC and Murphy's Law. And so now, being old, looking back on it, I can say like, yeah, the first like punk rock tape, the first rock tape I bought like wasn't Led Zeppelin, it wasn't like Jimi Hendrix or any of that shit. It was like fucking the first Murphy's Law record.
That's
And
awesome.
that's the truth, you know, like 100% the truth. Now, if you came into my room in like 1985 or 1986 and you looked at like my tapes and my records, it was all hip hop. It was all like Run DMC, Curtis Blow, Fat Boys.
What did you like about that? Like, what was it that stood out to you?
I don't know. I still can like, if we just like were sitting here and you just like we weren't talking and you just like turned on any Run DMC record, I still know like every word to like almost every song. I don't know.
That shit. Can you actually
It was
rap?
part of
Can you rap well or?
No, I can't rap. I'm really bad. No. It was a failed career for sure. I didn't make it past 11, but we were really into like breakdancing.
Oh yeah,
and,
breaking too.
Just the whole culture of like all that shit. You go to the movies, like the first R-rated movie I snuck into was like Crush Groove, which was like the Beastie Boys and Run DMC.
Oh my god,
stuff, so.
That's awesome.
And looking back on it as an old person who's like now like teaching people about like how I grew up.
Yeah.
I watched Crush Groove the other day, and it's like Rick Rubin as like a skinny Rick Rubin.
Holy shit.
Producing records, and like there's no mystery to me to that. Like when I like draw the comparisons in New York to like the people who like I feel like became like really really successful, like super successful, it's like they saw this culture and they saw this like whole thing happening in New York that was so intense that they were like, how could we not fuck with this? This is so crazy, and at one point they all documented it in this really cheesy movie that I saw when I was really really little.
Well, that was like the time when Breaking
but
came out and like ninjas were really cool,
exactly.
and Chuck Norris was amazing. Yeah, I love that time period. Missing in Action. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. Technically, Chuck Norris is still amazing.
That's true. That is very true.
He's just doing infomercials now.
So how did that like? So how did this? You're like 11 around this time, and you're like finding all this out. So like, what was your like between now and like when you got out of high school? What was your like the high school life like for you personally? And then did you find more music in that time? Like, were you a part of like any kind of clique or anything, or like friends, or what did that look like?
Sure. Well, what happened was my parents, my stepfather was working at Westchester University, which is outside of Philly, and he was driving there every day, and he didn't want to drive every day. So at one point he was just like, we have to move to Westchester, which to me was like moving to the moon. But so I moved to the suburbs, and I got really, really like insanely depressed as like a little kid, because I was used to like having like some sense of independence. I could take the train, I could take the bus. There was lots of stuff to do in Philly, and like you could basically get anywhere in a half an hour, much like New York or whatever. But in Westchester, there was like one bus that went to the mall, and it took my mom just as long to drive me to the bus as it would for her to drive me to the mall. And so there was sort of like this sense of like, now I'm in the middle of nowhere, even though it wasn't that far away, but I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere, and
oh yeah,
and I couldn't really do anything. So like I just like fell back on like music. And at that time, I just became like really into like guitars and like just like a lot of like, you know, just music that I had never listened to before, and classic rock, stuff like that. And I remember I got this. They got me like my parents got me like a subscription to Rolling Stone, and like Rolling Stone put out this issue that was like top 100 albums of all time. It's like sometime in the 80s, like probably like 87 or something, 86. And the first record on the list was the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's, and I had that record, and I was like, yeah, whatever, that record's whatever. And I don't really like the Beatles.
Interesting.
And then the second record was Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, and there was this huge spread, and there was a picture of the Sex Pistols, and it like probably like a 3-page write-up on like how cool this record was. And I remember like looking at the pictures, being like, these dudes look fucking crazy. Like I want to hang out with these guys.
Yeah.
So my mom drove me to the mall, and I had all these quarters, and I like went to the record store and I bought Nevermind the Bollocks with like quarters, and the poor girl at the record store looked at me like I had like 18 different kind of diseases. She was really pissed off that I was paying her like $10 in quarters, but that's the way I had to buy the record. And
was it on
so
tape
I took
or
it
vinyl?
home.
With tape or vinyl?
No, vinyl.
Okay.
And I still have it, which is really funny because I can say like, yeah, I bought Nevermind the Bollocks on vinyl in like 1987 with quarters, but I really did. And and I called my friend and I said, I know you're into like classic rock and stuff, like Led Zeppelin and stuff, but like I just bought this record and it's like way better. And my friend comes over and he like I put the record on, and we're both sitting there and like staring at it and being like, this is so fucking cool. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was my like full on like first glimpse of what actual punk rock was. I mean, other than like maybe having a Billy Idol record and like mentally jerking off to Cyndi Lauper or something when I was like, you know, not for real, but in my brain.
How old are you at this point?
Maybe she was gonna marry me. I was 6th grade.
Okay, so you're like
7th grade. So
11,
probably
12.
12.
Yeah.
12, 11, 12. But leading up to that, and this like everybody has like these weird triggers.
Yeah.
Where you remember something from your youth. Right around that time, I was still sort of hanging out with some of my friends from Philly, and over the summer, we were hanging out, and my friend, like, everybody had like those old radios, like the boom boxes with the tapes and everything.
Yeah.
And we're standing in this like playground, and my friend comes over with like a copy of like the NWA record, and he like puts it on, and we're all standing there staring at the radio, and we're just like, these dudes don't give a fuck about anything.
Yeah.
This is like, what kind of music is this?
Yeah.
Is this rap music? This isn't rap music. This is scary. Like,
yeah.
So it was like a conflict. Like, you know, I was listening to the copy of the NWA tape, and then I bought the Sex Pistols record. And to be honest, like as a little kid, I was kind of confused. I was like, should I like rap music or should I like the Sex Pistols? I don't know. I think I like the Sex Pistols.
Oh.
But later on in life, I learned to accept everything.
I feel like
in 7th grade, I was very confused.
That like reminded me the whole story of you standing around the boombox with your friends listening to NWA. I think I had the similar thing with Two Live Crew when that came out.
Oh yeah,
because my friend had it and we put it on, and it was the same. We were like it was his house and his driveway, and we had a boombox, and they put the tape in, and just the cover art was crazy. That's when they started putting on the labels, you know, the parental labels, which made it even crazier because you're like, we're not allowed to listen to this, you know. It's like we need parents around, and then they're swearing and stuff, and you're like thinking about how Bon Jovi's on TV, and like you said, Cyndi Lauper and shit. It's all clean, and then they're like,
Totally.
You're not allowed to listen to this. This is so,
Yeah.
I remember that feeling. That's funny that you have the same
Yeah.
thing.
No, I think
Yeah.
that I think that Two Live Crew definitely did the same thing. Probably more like NWO is more like I'm gonna shoot you, whereas like Two Live Crew was like I'm gonna just fuck every girl that you might know.
Well, I think their attitude
But
was more. I think they were more. We know what this is and we're doing, and we know it's for like shock. But I think NWA
oh, totally.
was more like, no,
Totally.
this is fucking real, and we're really pissed
Yeah.
off. And this has depth, and we're going to be around forever. And Two Live Crew is like, we'll just make
Yeah.
some money off this, like a lot of money off this.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my friends are probably like 10 years younger than me or something like that. But when that movie came out, when the NWA movie came out, I went and saw it, and my friends were totally bored.
What?
Like literally, they're watching it. They're like, "This is so boring." And there's a point where they're talking about going on tour, and I remember when they played Philly, and we were too scared to go, but we drove by it, and I remember seeing the parking lot filled with so many I mean, it was just the hood was took over the stadium.
Yeah.
And the record was barely in stores. It barely came out. We had tape copies of copies. It wasn't on the radio. None of that shit. And if you think about it, how crazy is it that in the late 80s a record can come out, not be on the radio, right? And the entire country knows about it because there was a Rolling Stone article just being these dudes are fucking crazy. You know? And selling out stadiums across the country 6 months after the record came out that nobody could buy in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about just, jumping forward a little bit, if you think about when we started listening to records, punk bands and like I said, the late 90s, that shit was never on the radio. And it's you heard that from friends doing that because when it's something is that good, and I think people, all they need to hear is a piece of it, and it just makes them go fucking crazy. They become these just kind of megaphones for these bands where you're thinking, man, I guess, put you could put anything on the radio or market the fuck out of it, but at the end of the day, if you're inviting everyone to the party and they show up and it sucks, no one's going to stick around and talk about it.
Yeah, it's true.
So with that record, I mean, yeah, that makes total fucking sense. So you're yeah, actually, I saw that movie. I was out in Portland when I saw the NWA movie, and I was just floored. I was like, this is fucking so fantastic. It's such a great fucking movie.
Yeah. I think if you grew up around that time, even remotely, it hit home. But
yeah,
So
so when you're in high school, how did you start going to what did you start going to more of when you got into your junior senior year? Was it hip hop shows or was it punk shows?
I mean, honestly, ironically, I started playing guitar in high school, and then right away it was I was just in the metal world. It was all Metallica, Anthrax, every other weird shitty metal band that came out in the late 80s. And I didn't really like the shows that much. The shows were really shitty.
Yeah.
Even the smaller shows, there were lots of fights. There was lots of weird racism and stuff.
This is the punk shows or this is
even
metal
though
shows?
Metal shows.
Okay.
There was crazy. I would go to see smaller metal shows, and there would just be crazy racism, crazy.
Interesting.
One black person comes to the show and there's 200 people staring at him. Not cool.
Jesus.
But I still had a connection to the punk world in some weird way, and then when I started going to punk shows, it was an instantaneous it just felt better. Everyone was nicer. The music was better to me. It was more fun.
Yeah.
The girls were pretty. Everyone everything was good. It seemed and this was obviously 20 years before social media or the internet, or not 20 years before the internet, but
before the internet really took off.
Yeah. So you really I really did feel that sense of community, even in the bigger shows. I remember, did you ever go to City Gardens? I don't know how old you are.
I'm 39, so I actually never. I saw maybe one show in my life in Philly, which is crazy because I've never been to the
Okay.
Unitarian Church or is it Troubadour or Trocadero? Which Troubadour, right?
Trocadero.
Trocadero, yeah.
Trocadero.
Troubadour's in LA. Yeah, I've been to so many
Yeah.
venues. There was some venue I saw like Jeremy Enoch. It was a bar, and then the other side of this cutout wall was a stage, and that was it. But I've heard of City
Okay.
Garden. Yeah, City Gardens. I think someone just talked about that in one of the previous episodes I did. So it was a huge. It's a like a stadium, right? Is it like where the like the?
No, it wasn't a stadium. It was like a club that held like probably like 1,500 people.
Oh,
But it
okay.
was like definitely like a shitty club. But it sounded amazing,
Hmm.
and it was like in Trenton, so it was like the halfway point between New York and Philly.
Oh, that's why I heard of it.
And
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, okay.
and it was really really scary. Like to get there was like it was tough to get there.
Was it like cutting through
Um,
Camden and shit getting there back then? Or
yeah. We went through Camden. I mean, like one time somebody like tried to like put their hand into my car, and I had to like run a red light.
oh my god.
But the thing about City Gardens was like you just like you saw a bunch of people that you never saw only at the shows, and you would just go to shows like be like, oh, you know what, like maybe I'll like run into Mike or something. Like I'll go. Like
Yeah.
I don't even like this band that much. Like who's Quicksand? I don't know. They're probably good. I'll go.
Oh my god.
You
It's
know.
amazing.
Yeah, really like that. And I remember like one time, sometimes the bigger shows were crazier, and it always smelled really bad and crammed people in there. But we went and saw Henry Rollins on the In the Silence tour, like after he was like done Lollapalooza and stuff. It was like '91,
Yeah.
and like probably 2 or 3 weeks before that, Bad Religion and All played there, and it was crazy. It was like sold out, crazy. And I was like really into Bad Religion. All my friends were really into like the Descendants, and I liked the Descendants because my friends would always like play me the songs and stuff, but they weren't a band anymore, and they're like, well, the Descendants and All are like the same band. And I was like, really? And then I saw All, and I was like, oh, they're playing all these Descendants songs. This band is awesome.
Oh shit.
And so 3 weeks later, we would go every weekend. So 3 weeks later, we went and saw Rollins band, and Greg Graffin from Bad Religion is just walking around, and he comes up to us and he's like, hey, didn't I see you guys like 3 weeks ago?
Holy
And we're like,
shit.
well, yeah. And they're like, good to see you. And he like patted us on the shoulder and stuff, and they're like, was that Greg from Bad Religion? And we're like, 16, and I was just like, wow, man, like this place is awesome.
They're like, holy shit, these
So-
are actually like normal people that are,
Exactly.
exactly.
And I
Not
think
touchable,
that
but like,
was,
yeah.
no, but I think that was like a definite like connection.
Well, it
You
kind
know
of
what I
like
mean?
it
Like,
leveled the
because
playing
you-
field. It didn't put them on this level that was above
Totally.
you. It was totally reachable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And here are these records that you like, listen to all the time. All the time. It's like everywhere we went, we were listening to like XYZ band,
Yeah.
And then you go to the show and like they just like come up and talk to you. You know what I mean? Like that's cool.
Yeah, you don't have to pay
And
like
that's
$200
sort of
for a backstage pass or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So was there like an
So-
actual?
and
Was there? I'm sorry, go on.
it was just cool. Like I said, I mean, I definitely I can't tell you how many bands I met without trying to meet them, just by like hanging somewhere and not even being remotely cool. Like this was like before like I thought about being in this business,
Was there any
or
other
even
stories?
knowing what this business.
Was there any other stories or any other like person or a couple people you can think of where it was so random and from back then that you bumped into them like that?
Nah, later on, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Later on, yeah.
So when you're like around this time, and how old are you at this point when you went to that show?
Man, like 16.
Okay, so
17.
and you're in Westchester and you got with friends and
Yeah.
drove out there. So like I think that in 17 was the driving age, so you're like right around the time of getting your license.
16 was the driving age.
Oh, was
Yeah.
it? Fucking oh, that's right, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I started
Ah.
I started driving like right away. I mean, actually, I saw DRI. I saw DRI in 1989 or 1990. I was 15. My friend stole his sister's car, and we drove to City Gardens, and Sick of It All opened, and it was like on the Blood, Sweat, and Tears tour, and we were like sort of like metalheads, and we saw this band like come out, and they all had short hair and a rat tail, and I remember being like, "Who the fuck is this band? Like, they probably suck." And then they were awesome, and but yeah, I mean, we definitely like my friend definitely stole his sister's car so we could go see DRI, and like he was 15, so that's probably the most punk thing I could have done when I was 15. But from then on, I was like, why do we go to like see Metallica? Why don't we just come to City Gardens? And my friend was like, this is way cooler. And we're like, yeah, this is way cooler. So that's what really started it.
It's funny too, because I feel like that's around the time when you'd go to shows and it was just kind of like the Wild West, where people started moshing and shit, and I'd hear stories of how scary it was to go to these shows. So by the time I started going to shows, it started to kind of soften up a bit, where I'm like, well, this isn't like as crazy as I kept hearing it was.
Yeah. Well, I think that the overall I just think that the overall situation in New York was way harder in the late 80s. Like I think that stuff that like we accepted as being like quote unquote wrong, like hurting people, robbing people, like in New York, like in that world, that was like totally normal. They're just like, yeah, I mean, I had to rob this dude, I had to beat this dude up, Yeah. Whereas like soon after that, it was like, oh, you know what? That's not really that cool. You shouldn't just like beat somebody up and like take all their money. But I definitely like saw that, and you could feel it in the shows. Like even in New York, like in the early 90s, like I would go to shows that like I would go to a show in Philly at like the Troc, and I would see the same show like maybe at like the Wetlands or something like that.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Oh yeah.
Totally different. Like one way, then you go to New York, it's a totally different thing.
When I would go to New York shows, unless like I saw Face to Face at what the hell is the name of this? It's a really small venue that's gone, but there was this when they went on, it was right.
Coney Island High?
No, it wasn't Coney Island High. It was a venue. It was very similar. Tramps.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they had like the giant holes in the middle of the floor, so you kind of had to, it was like right in the middle of the fucking floor where you had to kind of position yourself to do the fucking band. And that was like the first real, quote unquote punk show that I think I saw in the city. And it was like there was like definitely this bit of unity where there's these 5 kids in these white t-shirts that were kind of controlling the crowd, and it's like they'd open up the floor and everyone would just kind of go in the middle of the circle, just dance around. And this one guy just sat there with his back to the band, and this like 20 kids deep from him to the band, and he just put his hands out and was just launching people over his shoulder to crowd surf like over him. And it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And this is like when Face to Face was, it was right when Matt Riddle had left, and they did like the third record, the self-titled, before it just like went in a totally different direction. But there was like kind of this unity vibe there. But every time I just felt like in the city in general, if you were smaller, unless you were a big band, like no one gave a shit. Like,
yeah.
And then Jersey,
I think it's still like that there.
Yeah, I mean there was no like local scene, but in Jersey there was this. You'd pack 300 kids at a show, and like with like 5 or 7 bands that no one knew. Like was Philly like that, or were they like New York where you had to be a bigger band for people to show up?
I think Philly was definitely like that. I mean, I think that Plow would always play to a lot of people, and then they would go like random places like outside of Philly. Jersey was always good, but I mean like they would go to like New York, and if they were playing by themselves, like there'd be like 40 people there. Now those 40 people would be really into it. Like, they'd be like, our expectations were way higher too. If there weren't 200 people at the show, we'd be like, that show sucked.
Well, if you're used to it, and you show up and then you're like, well, what the fuck is this? Like, this sucks.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I remember like being like, having a label and like having like a merch table. It's like if I didn't make like $300 at the table selling records, I'd be like, that show was terrible. Yeah. Now it's like, oh yeah, the show was great. We do like $200 in merch.
Yeah. So like, did you obviously were in a band first and then you did Creep Records, right?
sort of.
I'm saying
I was
obviously,
in a
like.
shitty band.
Okay, yeah. So tell me,
Yeah,
like,
no,
tell me how you started
I
playing.
was in a shitty band.
Okay, yeah. Talk about that.
I decided that I wanted to be in a punk band with my friends. So my friends couldn't play any instruments. But they were really trying hard to like be in a band, and it was like totally horrible. So they'd be like, "Can you come over and help us?" And I would come over and I'd be like, "Man, like, you're doing all this shit wrong. Like, what are you trying to do?" And they'd be like, "I don't know. Like, I want to like play this song," or like they're trying to learn songs that like were way out of their like realm of music.
Okay.
And I was like, I think we'd be better off like just like trying to like write songs, and like maybe you could write songs that you could play that are simpler than like trying to learn like Bad Brains, which like you could barely play guitar, so like no Bad Brains. um, and so we would just kind of like fuck around, drink beers, and like write these songs. And I was in like I went to Berkeley for guitar like over the summer, like between my junior and senior year
Oh wow.
in high school, and I thought I wanted to be a guitar player, but then when I went to music school, I was like, this is terrible. Like this is like I don't even understand where the music is here. Like it just seems like they're just like unless you want to play jazz or something like that, like there's nothing really. Music school is sort of,
Theory
I don't know. I think it's
and
changed.
math and all
I think
that.
yeah. I mean, I think it's changed a lot now. Like nowadays, like there's like music business classes, and there's a whole. It's a bigger spectrum now in terms of music
Yeah.
than it was like in the like mid '90s. But so I decided that instead of like going to college and learning how to like play more jazz guitar, that I could like take the money that my parents saved for me to go to college. Also, college was very expensive. It still is. It's more expensive than it was then. But I remember being like, well, if I get out of college, I'm gonna have like this crazy student loan, and I'm gonna have all this debt, and I mean, I'm gonna be like a senior citizen by the time I get out of school. Like, I'm not gonna be able to start a band. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be like 24 or 23 or something.
Yeah, so
like,
old.
That's so old. Yeah. Well, when you're 18, it's like, oh my god, dude, like you'd be like 22 and try and start a band? No fucking way.
Yeah.
So I was like, hanging out with my friends in high school, like senior year, and like, my one buddy was like, well, maybe we could just like get a house where we could practice, and like, like you're pretty good at like recording bands and stuff. Like you could just like record bands, and like we could just like put out records or something. And like I bet you people would buy it. And I was like, yeah, that could be cool. He's like, I mean, you don't want to like go into a studio and record, because you'd go into like a studio to make a record, and there'd be like some like dude who was like listening to Striper or something. It was like really, really weird. Like the glam rock scene had not like died from the recording realm.
Yeah.
And I looked into it, and I was like, holy shit, like I could actually like probably like, if like one of my friends wanted to help, like we could probably like go in on like a down payment on a house, and I could put a studio in the basement, and like we could start recording. Maybe.
Oh shit.
And we were like, oh, this will be like the Discord house, and like we were like thinking about like Fugazi and all this stuff. I'm like, it's gonna be just like that. It's gonna be awesome. So it was sort of like a weird, perfect storm, but not exactly perfect. But
So is that how Creep
that was
Records
before-
started? Is that like literally how?
yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. I mean, we put out a 7-inch in high school and sold it, but the meat of it was like me and all my friends like being like, let's just like live here. And then I was like, I'll work here. And unfortunately, what happened was like I got really busy like right away, and I made like the biggest mistake, which was like I was like, I never want to work a real job ever again. So I was like working at like a drugstore or something. No, I definitely was working at a drugstore. And I was like, fuck these people. Like I'm making like $7 an hour or something. Like working in a drugstore. Like I'm just gonna record bands for like $12 an hour. Didn't realize like that I could have done both. Probably
Interesting.
like built my business instead of like constantly be living off it. You know. Um, I can't even like put into words like I watched all these other labels like just like come up like the same time I was doing my shit and like being like they're doing ads. That's so stupid. Why are they doing ads? Like
Wow.
that's dumb. You know? And then it's like, you know, how many different sales reps do I talk to from Hopeless every week? You know?
Holy shit. So like when you started it up, so did you actually build the house and do that, or did you just get the record store?
No, we didn't build the house.
Or buy a
but
house, I mean.
I found a house. We bought a house. And all my friends moved into it. Me and this other guy bought the house, and then we built a studio in the basement. And probably the coolest thing I did at that time was I couldn't get anybody to like come over and look at it. Plus, I mean, to be honest, I had no fucking idea what I was doing. Like when I say that I would just like bought some gear and just like go downstairs and just stare at it, like literally, I'd be like, "What does this do?" I don't know what any of this stuff does.
What made you buy that stuff though? Did you just like
And
read what other people were buying and say, "Oh, I need this track"?
I guess the simple story behind that was like in high school, I had a really really bad studio experience in high school with like I was in a band that was like a shitty band that sounded like the Red Hot Chili Peppers or something,
Hot.
and yeah, it was terrible, and they wanted to record at this place. My mom was friends with this guy who had this like dirty cool studio in Philly, and we went and like took a tour of the studio, and he was like this miserable dude who was like smoking cigarettes and drunk, and he had all this gear and he had this huge board, but the place was like kind of like bombed out, but he played us stuff and it sounded great, and I was like, yeah, let's record here, and they're like, there isn't even a couch here. No. So we went back to the suburbs and we went to this like fancy studio that had a nice couch, and I had like the worst recording experience like ever. And then when the record was or demo or something, when it was done, it was like terrible. And I remember like thinking like I can get better guitar sounds like on my 4-track in my basement than like this record that I just paid $2,000 for. Sounds like shit. I was friends with other bands, and basically I had a 4-track, and I would just like had some guitar pedals and stuff, and I would just like I was the dude that would like come over to your band practice and record your band.
No shit.
Yeah, for like a 6-pack. But the 4-track recordings were like honestly they were like crazy good. But one thing that I didn't understand until later on in life is that like the cassette 4-track recorder has its own limitations, so that it was really really hard to fuck it up.
Interesting.
Like it didn't sound like super good, but like if you were doing something really wrong, it fixed it for you.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was really hard to make something sound really bad on a 4-track.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about a 4-track, and if I'm looking at just the setup, because I've recorded a bunch of times, and you just think how many
Sure.
mics go into a drum kit, and then you got to plug in. Let's say you have just drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. And
Yeah.
if you did that strictly, the drums at that point would just be a mic pointed at the drums. The
Yep.
guitar would probably be either a mic pointed at the amp or the guitar directly plugged in. Same with the bass. And then the vocals would just be a direct line to the tracks, and you're singing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did it like a mic on the drums, a guitar, and a bass and a vocal.
Yeah.
And then if it was more than that, I would like bounce down the drums, I guess. We would maybe do like 4 tracks of drums and then bounce it down to 1 track, or 3 tracks and then bounce it down to 1 track. Yeah, 3 tracks and then bounce it down to 1 track.
Or you get like electric drum kit, which is awesome.
Yeah. No, I did all kinds of weird shit. I was like, I did like some drum machine. I don't know what I did. But I remember like being like, I'm really good at this. I should do this all the time. And then when I got an 8-track, and it was like, I didn't know what I was doing at all. Like looking back on it, like the amount of hours I spent like just staring at my stuff, just being like, I have a band coming over here in 3 hours. I should probably learn how to use my shit.
I mean, that's the best way to learn it, man. Under the gun. It's
Yeah,
just, well, I
yeah,
could put this off, and I could say, I'll get to it. 3 months later, you still haven't touched it. But you're like, shit, I got 3 hours to get this stuff fucking going. Like,
yeah,
I can't
yeah, I
not
know.
be like tussed out.
Yeah.
So you started this off. So you're in the house. You've got the equipment, and you started recording bands. Did you have I mean, I'm guessing Creep Records came after the fact of you starting to do this, because when people were like, oh, Arik records.
Yeah, well, what happened was we had the house. I had the 1/7-inch, and I wanted to record all the time. So like the business card, the selling point was like the other shitty punk bands that we played with. I was like, well, you should come over to my house and you should pay me to record you, and I'll put out your 7-inch. And so that statement in itself like resonated through like our entire small punk world, and everybody was like, yeah, go over to the Creep Records house and like make a record, and like like Arik will put out the 7-inch. So I did that for a little while, but the real change was a couple months after we were living there and I wasn't working as much as I wanted to work. I was like, well, we just have to have like a crazy party in the house where we get like 1,000,000 bands to play. We'll have like a Halloween party. We'll get 1,000,000 bands to play, and then I'll show everybody the studio, and they'll all want to record here.
Interesting.
So we did, and the show was like insane. Like, I don't know, probably 300 people there, probably 100 people in bands, but like even still, like it was really crazy. And you have 15 bands playing your house. At least 3 of them wanted to make a record like right away.
Yeah.
So
did you record that show?
Man, cool. I'm like, yeah. No, I didn't record that show. Later on, I started recording shows, but like it was enough that like it was like, hey, like while you're here, why don't you come downstairs and look at this cool place where we like make records, and like there's no like bullshit striper shit going on here. Like if you give me $500, I'll give you a record. And it was like, okay. And then the parties like ended up being like really, really crazy. Like really crazy.
What do you mean? Like describe crazy. I always ask people about like explain a crazy tour story. They come up with something. I'm going like, all right. It's like, what would define like a crazy party? Just being a shitload of people, or like crazy stuff happened?
A shitload of people just like crammed into like a living room. I mean, we didn't live like a normal human being at all. Like it was totally all the chaos was totally normal. That's like, it wasn't to the point where it was like extremely gross, I'd say, but we just got used to the point where like and almost instantaneously after probably the first party, I instantly had like punk bands from all over the country calling me trying to play my house. Like there was no like, oh, this is like a house venue, none of that bullshit. It was just like, yo, I heard you had this crazy Halloween party, we want to play there. I was like, okay. Like Thomas from like Strike Anywhere, he was like in this band called Inquisition. Like he called me, he's like, hey, I heard you have like a party next weekend, like where there's like bands playing, and this is like our second party we ever had. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, we're gonna be on tour. Well, we're not even on tour, we just want to come up and play it. And I was like, okay. They're like, we're friends with Weston. I'm like, Weston's not playing the show. And he's like, I know, but I just thought you liked them. And I was like, yeah, I like them. Okay, I guess. I don't know. And I remember being really mad at him because like they played for like 45 minutes, or they took like 20 minutes to set up their amps or something. Like I remember just being mad. I'm like, this guy calls me like a week ago. I don't even care about his band. Like
he knows Weston.
Years later, yeah. And then years later, like people are like, oh my God, Thomas from Strike Anywhere, I touched my head, I'm so special. And I'm like, first of all, he's 50. Second of all, like he played my house when he was like 30, and I was 20. And
is that the dude with
they
the
took
dreads?
20 minutes to set their amps up, so fuck that.
That's
Thomas is really nice.
Is that
But,
the singer with the dreads, or he used to have dreads?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
he's super cool. It's just like it was just like a funny thing like that I'll never forget.
That's hilarious.
And and that was just part of it. Like I remember like being like I was 20 years old and I remember being like, why is this happening to me? Like, how come my phone just rings all day long? And then people would make fun of me. They're like, you never leave your house. You just like you're on your phone all day. And I'm like, it rings all day.
So did you have like a vision at this point? Because I mean, it was you're like, okay, well, I'm in a band. I went to music school. It sucked.
Sure.
My friends like,
Sure.
oh, let's do a house. Let's record stuff. And then is it started kind of pieces kind of come together at this point for you? Or like, okay, let me really think about this. I basically created a label. I could just do this.
Sort of. Well, around the same time, and we're still talking about like relatively like about a year's worth of time. What happened was one of the first bands I recorded, probably the second or third band I recorded in that realm, was Plow United.
Yep.
Plow, whatever. And they were great. And they were like not like any other band that I had seen like in that time.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, holy shit, like this is the best band. And my friends were like, my roommate was like, I told you gotta make the record. Like they're the best band. So they were doing records with this guy Jack from Coolidge Records in New Jersey, and I was making records for him for like a couple $100, and I remember being like, well, I have a record label. Why don't I just like put out their record? And Joel from Plow was like, well, you don't have a real record label. And I think that this is like sort of like my biggest problem in life, that the way I live is like when somebody tells me I can't do something, then I become like hyper focused on just doing it.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Whether
That's
it's
bad
bad for my health or not. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do this. Oh, yes, I can. I'm going to fucking do this and set off a bunch of explosives and fuck all you people. You know?
I'm literally going to fuck all of you.
Yeah. So he's like, well, you don't have a real record label. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you haven't put out like real records. And this is like resonating with me. And I was like, you're booking studio time with me like every 3 weeks to record. So basically, I just signed all their friends.
Yeah.
Like every single band that they played shows with, I did all their records and I put them out like really fast. Like I was pressing probably 3 or 4.
But the whole thing was they'd come in, they would spend $500 and record, and then you'd put them out on your label. Is this all happening around that time, or did that like? What time period are we talking about, like right now, the first year, or is it just like within the coming years of this, of after that party?
What do you mean?
Like you said that, I was like, the question I had was, did you kind of put it all together that I could just do this? And then you said, yeah, like that whole beginning part of the story was that kind of all happened in that first year, like the party, and then bands wanted to come over and you're saying, hey, I could record you for $500 and I'll also put it out.
Sure.
So as that became like from then that for the first, let's say 5 years, or I don't know, you still could be doing that. Like,
yeah. I mean, it was definitely like 2 or 3 years, consistently. That was like the model, and but the side view of that at that time, like probably 1995, 94, 95.
Yeah.
Was I was trying to do the Plow record.
Yeah.
And then once he saw like other stuff happening, like Joel was like, oh, well, we actually want to do the record with you. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, I've been setting this up for 6 months, like waiting for you to say like, okay, you can do our record.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think that the label would have really gone as far as it did in that time if I hadn't been focused on doing a Plow record. But to be fair, I was just like recording them all the time too, so it was like it was a combination.
Well, I mean, it's like I don't think anything. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of labels have that band that just kickstarts them, either just gets some recognition or it just kickstarts them to go, I just want to keep doing this because I want to find more bands like them. So like after you put that record out, did you kind of say like, all right, well, this record's out, there's a certain style that I want to do, or did you kind of keep it open? Because it sounds like you're very specific of the bands that you do like and the shit that you won't listen to.
Yeah. No, it was a thing, like that was like the beginning of like, you know, we were like really into like Lookout Records and probably like some of the Epitaph stuff. Fat Records was just like starting to like be real.
Yeah.
Um, and we were like a hair follicle off of that. You know what I mean? Like I was very into a lot of the stuff that Lookout was doing.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, was there, yeah, like, yeah, I think like the bands that I'd listened to, there was very like just straightforward. But Plow had this weird, not that weird, but they kind of, it's like they had a straightforward sound, but they also advanced on it, but not like over dramatically. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of like,
Yeah, yeah.
it was catchy and it was like different but it was just something about it stood out where it wasn't just 30 songs on a CD that were just straightforward and you're like, well, what fucking song number is this right now? It sounds like everything else. Like each song I felt like would stand out from the others.
Well, the other thing is I think that Plow, they were one of the first bands like that was like considered like a quote unquote pop punk band
Yeah.
that were like a little more than like, it was like much darker.
Oh yeah.
And like I think that like, you know, like I mean, just to think back to that time, like, you know, Weston was really popular and I mean Weston was more popular than Plow was, but like you know, you have Weston where like they're like singing songs about like the girl at the soda shop, which was all bullshit. Like you're almost 30 years old, you're not really like obsessing over some girl at the soda shop in 5th grade, but you're just like making a pretty song that's catchy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like, you know, it's like, and I mean, this is more of like a personal connection, but like I remember, like I could tell you what every Plow song on the first, actually all the records, but like all the like heavy hitters. If you're like, yo, this Plow song, like blah, 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 I'm like, yeah, this is exactly when that happened, and this is why that happened, and this is where these lyrics come from, and they came from a real place.
Interesting.
That was like part of their lives, and like honestly, like the dudes in the band are gonna be mad at me for saying this, but like the reason why like the later records, like 18 years later, like didn't resonate like as well as the other records did is because like those experiences were gone.
Oh yeah.
And they're not the same. It's like, you know, like there's certain emotions you have as like a 20-year-old kid, you know what I mean, that you're very passionate about, that like disappear when you become an adult.
Well, I mean, that's when you develop your sound.
And things change, you know.
Yeah, I mean, your sound is developed.
Yeah, but
you know, it's like you can't carry that same. You can carry the style of sound, but like you're right, the shit you're singing about, it's a 20. Like I don't know, man. Like fucking a 2 decade or little less of a gap. You're not your passion isn't the same as what it was like when your first records or when you wrote your first songs. It's different. It's a different, like you're a different place. You're not
absolutely.
like, you know, you're like, oh, you might be married or you might have a mortgage. You know, all these adult things kind of creep in, and those are the things that are annoying you. But you're like, yeah, but should I write about this? Because it's not as angsty.
Definitely. 100%.
So what was like the process like back then? Is it you would record a band, you put it out, then did your house just like loaded up with boxes of albums that you're now, and then you're like just driving to record stores and dropping them off? Like, how did you start getting records in the stores?
We never really did it well, you know, to be honest. I mean, It was never, we had like small time distributors that ripped us off. I didn't understand that world, you know, I didn't understand the music business. So I got taken advantage of a lot by most of the people that I worked with.
Really?
Yeah. Because I was so used to like the instant money, you know?
So was it bands
like,
or was it
I was
like
so used to like going,
or distributors? Like who was like where you started kind of finding like what the fuck?
distributors.
Okay.
Distributors.
Interesting.
Well, the thing was like we weren't a big enough label. We weren't a big enough label for like people to take us seriously like every month, you know, and the way the music business works and worked back then too was like you had to be really, really consistent with like big releases. And the sad part is that like at that point in time in the 90s, I was like getting offered big releases. The first Bigwig record, like Tom from Bigwig called me and said, "Hey Eric, do you want to put out my record? It's here. I'll give it to you." And I said, oh no, I didn't record it, and like I don't know, I don't even want to listen to it. I don't
Oh
care.
shit.
And like, he's like, okay, well, we're gonna give it to Fearless,
Yeah.
literally, like
Yeah.
that happened. First Boy Sets Fire record. Hey, we recorded this record. Like, you want to put it out? It's here. Take it. And I was like, oh no, I didn't record it because I was so into like the whole cycle of like working with the band and like seeing the record from the beginning to the end that I was
Yeah.
like pretty close minded to like seeing like, well, the other side of it is like, is this band going to tour? Are they like popular? Are the records going to sell? Like, if they go into a store, is like, are they going to order more than one copy of the CD? Like, is it just going to sit there and no one's going to buy it? You
Well,
know what I mean?
that's
So
an honest concern to have when you're a business, like you're putting shit out and you need to
I
make
didn't
money.
have that concern.
Oh, okay. So
You know what I
you
mean?
had the opposite concern. You were like, oh, I don't give a fuck
I
if
had
you're
the
gonna.
opposite thing. I was like,
Ah.
no, I'm not. No, I don't care about Bigwig. I don't care about Boys That's Fire. I'm recording XYZ band that nobody's ever heard of before, and like this is going to be awesome, and I'm going to spend all my money from like half-ass promoting this like thing.
How did you promote back then? Like, what did you do for promotion?
Posters, flyers. We did do a lot of college radio. We mailed out a lot of college radio stuff,
Okay.
but very minimal. Like Maximum Rock and Roll, like once a month. You have like a quarter-page ad in the back of the magazine.
Did you
It
do
was
like
very small.
did you have like a mailing list where you'd like to send a catalogs to people like once a
Yeah,
month? Okay.
yeah. We'd send. We probably had like about 1,000 people on our mailing list, maybe more.
Okay.
I don't know. It was like, I mean, that stuff was cool. I missed the concept of like actually evaluating like whether you personally like something and like whether it's a smart move to do that or not, and like always trying to make sure that the bands were happy on some level and not accepting the fact that we're all like musicians and not necessarily mentally stable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Oh yeah.
dealing with all the repercussions of all of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's
So
like I mean, just from knowing from being in a band, it's the you also have the band's inner turmoil that you have to deal with between three or four or five people,
oh yeah,
and they have no direct
yeah,
vision of where they want to go. And then you have a record label who they're like, well, we're gonna put shit out. They're like, okay, cool, we'll put it out. And then it's never like the label sits down with the band and says, okay, like what is your vision of where you want to go? Because before we, quote unquote, get married in this decision, we need to know that you're going to keep going. And then some record labels will put shit out, and the band will be
exactly,
like, oh, we broke up, and they're like,
exactly.
fuck, man.
No, I had that out. I mean, like there's certain bands that like there's certain people that I was good friends with, and like that last phone conversation we had was like, at one point, like my one good friend was like, well, we just recorded a record up in New York and we really like it. So even though like you record everything and to this day, like, I release stuff that I don't record. So it changed like
Yeah.
probably over 10 years ago. But he was like, it's a really great record. Like, you just have to give us like $7,800. And this is in like 2002.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, I'm not gonna pay $7,000 for your record. I mean, it would be one thing if you were like touring. It would be one thing if you were like a serious band, but like there's a really good chance that you guys are gonna break up like 3 seconds after this record comes out, and like I would have to like take a loan to do this record, and that's just
Yeah.
that's the honest truth. So like I don't even care if it's good because I can't afford to do it. And he was so mad. He like got so mad. He was like, after all we've been through, like what the fuck? Like you don't believe in me? Like saying awful shit, like. And I was just like, no, it's not really like that. It's just like, we did your second record and you got a whole new band, and it took like a year and a half for us to like finish the record because your band members were like flailing and you never toured, and we lost a bunch of money. So as much as I love your band, like this isn't something that I can do.
Yeah.
And he was like, fine, fuck you. Literally, like, up until, like, Facebook came out, like, we, like, talked on Facebook, and, like, he was like, I'm sorry I was such a dick. I
Which
stopped drinking.
which band was this again, or do you not want to say?
I don't even, yeah, I don't know.
That's fine. No, I'm. Oh, it's
If
glad that you made it up.
if I called out every band for being like having some type of substance abuse, it wouldn't even be interesting. Um,
What was your signing process like? Did you actually have people sign something, or was it a handshake?
uh, no. These days, yes, but no. Uh,
Like no, meaning you
a
just
few times,
you don't have a process, or
it was usually just like a handshake. Yeah, yeah. I had one band, this band On the Minor Princes, from Long Island. I did their record, and then as soon as the record came out, Revelation wanted to put it out, and they were like they got like insane. They were like, Revelation wants to sign our band, like they want to reissue our record, and I had recorded the record for like 3 weeks, and we pressed like 2,000 CDs, and they didn't want to buy the CDs. They just wanted to repress the whole thing, and I was like, okay, well I just pressed 2,000 CDs, like I think that if you want to sign this band, like you should at least pay for them. And the guy from Revelation was like, okay, well what does that mean? And I was like, that means like you should give me like $2,000. And he was like, we were thinking more like $400. And I was like, well, you're gonna sell the CD like the first week it comes out, like to stores for like $8 or $9. So, like, I don't think that's fair. And he's like, yeah, it's really not supposed to be fair.
wow.
It's just what we would do. And I was like, and the other, it was like a three-way call, and like the drummer of the band's like on the phone, and he's like, come on, Eric, don't do this to us. And I was like, do this to us? I was like, you owe me thousands of dollars. Now there's a bigger label like on the phone who wants the record that I recorded. They don't even want to pay for the studio time or the money that I spent to press the CD.
Yeah.
And the band was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then, they signed to Revelation Records. They did a record that came out 3 years later, and nobody cared.
So
people did care. But.
So Revelation, they basically said, we'll give you $400 to basically break your contract. And then when we sell those CDs that you put out, you're not going to make shit off of that? Or we're going to scrap that CD. We're not even going to put it out, and we're just going to put a new one out. So everything you did is like, go fuck yourself.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. Was there any labels that you were surrounded by that you became like friends with and, kind of helped each other out?
Well, I worked pretty closely with Blackout Records in New York, but I didn't have any good relationships. I didn't understand the business enough, and I think the biggest problem that people have in that world, especially in that time, was like there were no rules, and there was not a lot of clarity as far as like what was really gonna happen. So, like these days, if I get into a situation and I think something's gonna be weird, before it gets weird, I say, listen, like this might get weird, so like let's think about this right now. And sometimes if you ask somebody something, if you say something to somebody, there's one person in the band says, well, yeah, I don't think this or that, like right this second, like as of yesterday, like there's like this sort of like punk rock horror movie coming out, and we got offered to do the soundtrack to the movie, and there's a bunch of like bigger bands on it that aren't that big, but I mean like they're established bands. And the people who did the movie said like, well, we got clearances for all the songs, okay? And we got the rights to do the soundtrack to this movie, and we really want it to be like on vinyl, so we really think that you could do that because you make records, and this would be really cool. So we said, did you get all the clearances for the songs, and like are all the royalties like cleared, like for us to make like 500 records? And they said, yeah, everything is cleared.
Oh, no.
Well, 3 seconds before we're supposed to like start working on this record, it's like, well, everything's cleared except for all the royalties. Which is like 13 different bands. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not that big of a deal, but it's like, okay, so all these bands need to be paid royalties for being on this record. So before we get started, I said, well, can we just pay the royalties like up front, and that way there's nothing to be like accounted for. It's like, we're making 500 records. Here's some money. Thanks for putting your song on here. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And the guy, the main producer of the movie was like, yeah, just reach out to the bands and pay them. And I'm like, no, this is your movie. You reach out to the bands and you pay them. I'm going to give you some money and you can work it out with them, so that when we actually like get this together and we start selling it, like, I don't have to worry about it, because like, it's too much work for me.
Yeah.
Like, and this is your movie. This is your thing. You know what I mean? And the guy was like, that seems fair. But 20 years ago, I just would have been like, we'll work it out later. Everything's going to be great. We'll work it out, you know. And the record comes out, and then I'm a dick because I'm like not paying the right person like 70 cents.
I can't even, I always hear, I mean, like, my band like never made fucking any money. I think like the most money we made was like $250 each from this like reunion show we just played. And we were like, holy shit, we actually made some money. But
yeah,
we never had to worry about CD sales making dick, because it was like, it would basically be, we'd buy a box from the label, or we'd get a box and we had to pay them back and then buy another box and shit like that. So when you listen to, like, I'm trying to go with this question, kind of like, I want to get your side of it. When you hear bands in interviews and things like that talk about how they don't make money, like, what's the side of it from the label side? Like, when you hear that, you're like, yeah, you're right, you don't make shit. Or you're like, well, here's my side of the story.
I can understand it. I think that I don't think there's that much money.
Yeah.
I think that the music business, like, and I'm in it, so like, I'm not saying this like from a standpoint of like, oh my god, I can't believe anybody does this. Like, I do it, so I'm not like saying that, but the system is broken. It's not set up to, it's not beneficial to bands. It's barely beneficial to the people that back the bands. I mean, you know, I have a Spotify account. It's still garbage. It's bad for bands.
Yeah.
I like the convenience of it. You know what I mean? But the most money you could possibly make as a band on an independent level, as a punk band or as an any person band, was just like what you said. You know, I need 30 CDs. Here's $150.
Right. Yeah.
You know, 30 CDs. Here's $150. And if you think about it, if you were buying CDs for $5 a piece and selling them for $10 or $12 or whatever you were making $5 a piece.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the other side of that. Here's the label, which could be anything. It could be like, you know, Fruit Loop Records, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It could be anybody that wanted to like physically put money behind XYZ record. A lot of times, like, I mean, I used to get paid to make a record for my own band. So the studio would get paid something. So even if the studio got paid like $1,000, it was like, okay, I want you to make a record. Here's $1,000. So here's some money. Then we're going to press the CD. So the CD costs $2. And the label selling the CD to the band for $5. So the label makes $3. Yep. When the band sells it, they make $5.
Yeah, I mean, that's like how it was in the 90s, when before downloading really took off. That was probably around around the time where you could. And again, if you have to have distribution, so when the band is doing these signing agreements, these labels who had these, you know, they'd pay for these crazy lavish recordings and shit like that, and you know, you'd have to pay that back and then make the money on top of that. But like for you though, I mean, it almost made sense. Like, yeah, you didn't want to take some of those bands that were already pre-recorded just for whatever values you had. But at the same time, it's you also were making money.
Where I screwed up was like a lot of those people in a very small window, like we're talking about maybe like 6 months, probably would have just like been like, I just want you to do it, and they would have been like, here's a record that's done. Yeah. And I think that I was more like, I was so into the process of all of it, even though I wasn't even like 100% awesome at my quote unquote craft.
Hmm.
I was so into it that like I turned down some stuff that was like on a silver platter, just like ready to go, you know?
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you the difference, the shift in like what my label would have been if I had like 3 or 4 bands that were like on the level of like, stuff that like what Plow was doing. And like those bands like went out and toured for a year. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like Plow broke up like 5 seconds after they started making records. Like they were just like, I don't know, like we're gonna tour for like 3 weeks and then fuck this. Like Sean's gonna be a teacher, you know. And then it was like, I mean, you can't even. I don't even know if you know, but like they got back together for like Riot Fest and stuff, and it was like they had like missed this entire universe of their life, and they were like scrambling to get it back. It was just like,
What do you mean? Like,
you know,
what does
it's
that mean?
not gonna, it's never gonna be 1995 again, dude. Like, it's
Oh, like they
never
were
gonna
trying to
happen.
like write new stuff at
Like,
that time after doing it. Right.
yeah, like the world has changed. Like they made a record that was pretty cool. Like the record that Jumpstar put out was actually really good. They spent a shitload of money on it. Like they recorded with an awesome dude, but like the record came out cool, and like then they toured the East Coast for like, I don't know, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The East Coast, like from Boston to Richmond for 3 weeks,
Oh wow.
over and over again. Like you could have seen Plow United in New Jersey like 4 times in 3 weeks, you know. And it's just not, like at a certain point it becomes like not cool. And the show started being like 35 people, 40 people, and they didn't understand it. They're like, oh, people don't like our new record. It's like, no, people don't want to see you like 5 times in a month.
Yeah. Well, that happened. I've seen that happen before. I mean, it's like Weston right now. I mean, they're playing with Digger, but they spread it out at least, where they could
Yeah,
play in
yeah,
Jersey
definitely.
and New York and Philly. And like that's smart because that's also where they had a fan base back then. But it's not like they're going to Wisconsin and trying to make that
No,
shit happen because
no,
they would show up to nobody or like two people. It's like you have to
yeah,
really understand
yeah,
that anyone's going to come out to see your band now if it's been 20 years or whatever, like 15 years. It's for nostalgic purposes and they're there to relive
yeah.
their youth for a night. But they're like, hey man, I can't keep going to these shows because like I've got shit to do.
I think you just did the tagline for your podcast, man. That's like, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. But bands have a hard time like swallowing that pill. You know what I mean?
It's clear as day. I mean, maybe I see it because I'm in a band or I've worked for myself for so long, or I don't know. I just read about shit. It's like you can see a pattern. It's very clear that like the reason like this podcast can last for like a decent amount of time because everyone I'm talking to is a time capsule from back then, and it's like everyone wants to hear about this stuff, and it's like fun, and that's
Sure,
where that's where that
sure.
can work. As a band, though, there's certain levels, aspects of the music industry where it's like if I let's say I fucking interviewed the same person over and over again, they'd be like, all right, we know
Yeah,
we know
yeah,
we know that fucking story. Like we don't hear
yeah.
it again.
Although if you want to have another podcast and we can just talk about the NWA movie, I'm down. But yeah, sure. I know what you mean. I do know
This
what you
was the
mean.
NWA. Oh, that's fucking
Yes.
hilarious. You should actually. Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
Today is the 22nd anniversary of the death of Tupac, by the way.
Oh, is it really? Well, when this episode comes
Yeah.
out, it will not be that day, but today is September
Okay, well,
13th. So,
timestamp.
yeah, as
So
anyone knows, there's
there
also a
you go.
hurricane happening right about 2 hours from me right now in North
That's
Carolina.
true.
So like when downloading happened, how did you notice right away? Did that change anything with the label?
No. I think that when people started like copying CDs, and I guess maybe like Napster, LimeWire, a little bit, but I think that was all part of the shift of like people just not buying physical music anymore, and that definitely affected all of us. Um,
Like, did you see it
but
where one month all of a sudden it just
oh yeah,
dropped and you were like, wait a minute?
I wouldn't say it was one. I wouldn't say it was like 1 month, but it was like a gradual like to be honest, the biggest hit to our label was when Tower Records closed.
Oh, wow.
Like Tower Records was like single-handedly like the biggest supporter of like independent music in the country.
Really?
Yeah. They would. I mean, Tower would buy 150 copies of anything that you put out, and they would stock it on their shelves, and they would just like literally let it sit there for people to buy it. And they wanted to have it. Like they like, you know what I mean? Like for every like Promise Ring or Lifetime record that Jade Tree would put out that was like flying off the shelves,
Yeah.
you know, they would take a chance on like every other fucking record in their catalog, and it would be on their shelf. You know what I mean? So when they closed, there wasn't. They set the bar for all the other stores.
So if they were carrying
So,
it, the
does
other
that make
stores
sense?
were. Yeah. So if you have the
If
biggest.
they were carrying it, they'd be like, well, you know, Tower has it. I should probably have it.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
But they went out of business in like 2004.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny because when they went out, everyone was kind of like, yeah, fuck the giant, fucking up the music industry. That's crazy that I was totally opposite on the back end.
You know, do people say the same thing about Newbury Comics or Amoeba, or you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah.
It's like maybe they do, but like they don't understand like the background history of all that stuff. And like, I mean, I learned later on in life, like, you know, and having a store and stuff like that. Like, I heard stories of people telling me like, you know, Tower invented like the midnight sale. You know, they invented that.
Yeah.
Like the album coming out at midnight and like people lining up and buying it, like that was Tower Records in California in like the 60s, and they would sell like 2,000 Santana LPs in the middle of the night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's how like our world got built up. But I think that it's all relative. I think that like there were people that like saw stuff later on in like earlier in life where they're like in the 70s people would buy 3 copies of every album they like because you would wear out Led Zeppelin 2 so many times, or you'd roll joints on it and it would fuck it up. So you know, you had 1 copy that you listened to all the time, and you had 1 copy that you let your friend borrow. And you know,
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't too many records I wore out Appetite for Destruction. Probably you want to feel better about your life situation, just put on Appetite for Destruction and turn the lights out, and you know, it's all good.
I'll definitely try that. Yeah, I've been getting way back into buying vinyl a lot now. I bought a turntable like a month ago, and all I do is just look for vinyl now. And it's crazy because I even bought a couple CDs for my car, and something about listening to something from the beginning to the end of how they saw it. Or, digital is just you don't touch it; it's there. It's easy to just skip around and whatever. But a CD,
sure,
you had to physically hold it, but then you'd put it in the CD player where then it also would disappear, right? And you wouldn't be able to see it.
Right.
Well, now I've realized with vinyl is that you put it down and you watch it. It's a bigger thing that once you do it, it makes more sense. So it's like having the record player is cool. Like hearing that scratch in the beginning is awesome. Having the cover, the sleeve sitting on top of the record player, showing you what's playing, but then putting the record on and all that stuff. But then like you're like physically watching the vinyl, and I didn't really understand why all these color vinyls were so important, and now I do.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't make sense to me until I was like, holy shit, I'm watching. I'm getting the full experience. I'm listening and I'm touching and I'm watching the music.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know for...
Well, it also just, like, it's a time commitment. You know, like, it's not, like, a hands-off thing. Like you say, like, hey, I got this new record. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to this. And then maybe it's just because, like, there's more stuff for you to actually touch. Like maybe you just like sit down and the lyrics are right in front of you or something, or the pictures are right in front of you and you're just looking at it. But I think that there's like sort of like definitely an extra step of like just a process, like sort of like a meditative thing. Like
it is a commitment though, because my time. Everyone's really focused on time, especially now when you're looking at apps and all this stuff, and it's constantly what's the next thing, what's the next thing, what's the next thing. This actually kind of keeps you in a pocket of time for a minute where, you know, if you put your phone down, you could sit there and be like, wow, I'm actually like in this moment with this music right now, and you hear it differently, and that's interesting. I never thought about that.
I think it's amazing how many like younger people are buying turntables.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because like there's actually like a backlash from like YouTube and Spotify and all this stuff because it's not very real. I think that you're old enough to know when you got a CD or you got a record or even a tape, like, what's side A, what's side B, like how do these songs like tie together, like what makes there's sort of a disconnect between like how an album just gets put together now.
Yeah.
Like the mainstream pop music is just like singles.
Well, it's just all like, what song is everyone going to download the most? What's the
Uh-huh.
equation? Let's use the math equation. Okay, we get the hook like
Yeah,
this. All right, let's make it. But like these
yeah,
records
yeah,
where, the people sat down and did it, and then you can listen to a record from. I'm very picky about the records I'll buy too, because I'm like, I want to hear the whole thing. But then there's also the new experience
sure.
again where I'm like also driving to my local record store, which I didn't realize was there. And then I'm sitting down because they have a
Yeah.
bar. They literally have 5 taps like of
Is that
just
School
beer.
Kids?
Yeah, School Kids. It's
Ah,
fucking
see?
amazing, dude.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's how I didn't actually. I was like, oh, I was talking to a friend of mine down here. She's lived here all her life. I was like, yeah, I was in this record store. It's called School Kids. She's like, oh yeah, School Kids. I know about that. That was in Chapel Hill and stuff. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize it was known. You sit there and drink a beer.
How do you get a
wow.
bar? How do you get a bar in your record store? I don't know if I can pull that off in Philly, but if I could, I would definitely fucking do it.
Dude,
Yeah.
you come to North Carolina where they expect you to have beer anywhere you go. I mean, it's insane. It's like, okay, well, is there beer here? They're like, yeah, and it's all local craft brewery. Like, perfect.
That's great.
It's so fucking
That's
dope.
great.
Um, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I liked it down there. I mean,
It's
I had a
awesome,
great
dude.
time down there.
Yeah, except for this giant fucking hurricane that's like hitting us right now. But whatever. It died down. So is it creep?
You
Is
don't have
creep?
any ice storms.
Well, we have a ice storm, or if there's 2 inches and the place completely goes ape shit because they don't have any salt.
Yes. Yeah.
They have no salt. All the Northeast has all the salt. It's been taken away from us because then 2 days later it melts and then you're in shorts in March until probably about November. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Ugh. Yeah.
What what was it like watching the scene go from like what it was to what it is now? Like, have you seen like the punk scene more like when from the late '90s till now? Like, have you seen what did that look like?
Well, it got way more segregated. I would say in the 90s, in the early 2000s, and probably even more so in the 80s, which I wasn't around for. You just had shows. You had like bands play, and it would be like, well, this is this kind of band, and this is this kind of band.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's like, like if my band sounds like Jawbreaker, and then we play like a show with a band that sounds like, I don't know, Hatebreed, that would be super weird. Whereas like if you look at a flyer from like 1997, you see like Texas Is a Reason playing with Hatebreed,
Yeah.
and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, or like Weston used to play with Ignite all the
Or
time
Weston
back
played
then.
with every hardcore band. Yeah, Weston toured with Ignite. Yeah, exactly. Now a lot of people have like, well, there's different grades of pop punk. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Like, and I listen to like some cheesy new pop punk stuff. Like, I'm in Philly. Like the Menzingers are here, the Wonder Years are here. There's 4,000 bands like within a 2-mile radius, literally.
Yeah.
And probably 10% of them are like popular enough that they don't have day jobs. So that's great. But it's really like sort of odd the way the shows get put together.
Huh.
And the way there's this weird sort of like cliques within cliques of types of music. And I'm pretty removed from it because I'm just old, but like, there's a whole set of, people will only do shows if the band has a girl in them, which I'm all for girls being in bands, but like, why would you not like a band because they don't have a girl in it? Like,
Oh,
that
wow.
doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not like that, and I can understand why they would want more women in music for sure, but I don't understand why you would like not like a band when they're just like, oh, those are just guys, you know. So some of it's a little strange to me, but I think all in all, it's I think everything just goes in cycles and phases, and
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of our world's fucked up enough that like I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that like our music scene will help us get out of this a little bit.
This
We'll see. I'm actually waiting for some like actual real good punk rock to come out of like this shit storm that's going on in our America.
It was funny in Alan's interview. He talked about that. He's like, he goes, yeah, I wasn't really angsty or whatever back in the day. He's like, man, I'm more pissed off now than I've ever been. He's like, all I want to do is just get like a Liberty Spike fucking haircut and get out there and and really make a difference.
I can't tell if it's just because we didn't know the ways that we were getting fucked with back then, or the reality is just like it's so bad now that you're just like, oh, like, because I mean, if you think about it, like the stuff that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis now, like I hate saying this, but like think about how much racism is around you now.
Oh yeah,
it's out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Now maybe obviously some of that had to be like closeted for years and years, but now it's been like raised to a level of some type of acceptance, like, which is unacceptable. But I mean, still in the public sense, like, I mean, I'm dealing with stuff that I never thought I was ever gonna have to deal with again after I was like 17.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis. Like, I'm in Philadelphia. Why am I looking at fucking Confederate flags and like
Jesus,
like the stupidest bumper stickers you've ever seen in your entire life, with like just what I think is just like brain dead people walking around like talking about the dumbest shit. And it's not rampant, but the fact that it even exists at all makes me think like, how is this gonna change? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So,
I mean,
in the back of my head,
I think they thought the same thing back
What's
in
that?
the day. I think a lot of that stuff was thought back in the day too, when it was really bad, and it was, wow, how are we going to change this? And it changes. I don't think it's, and this, we don't have to go in this direction, but I don't think it's a person or a thing that makes people become something. It's like the people that are doing this, it was already there. And this just opened the door.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's like people are like, oh, it's so, you're like, it's so
100%.
different now. You're like, no, it's really not. It's just now it's just open in front of your face, which is almost better to have the cream rise to the surface, so you can just kind of scrape it off and it's clean again.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I wouldn't want to be, I would, if I knew some people that felt like that, I would rather know that they felt like that than not.
Yeah. It's just the whole time you're like, wow, you've been hidden racist this whole time. I can't believe I trusted you. With watching my dog.
I had no idea. Thank you for telling me. Exactly.
So real quick, so with Creep Records, I know you have the record store.
Mm-hmm.
And so is the label still officially there? Like, because I was looking at it and I'm on your website and I'm like, I'm doing some research and I'm like, oh, I'm like, how are you putting out like the Get Up Kids 4-Minute Mile on vinyl and Say Anything in Childish Gambino? Then I'm thinking, oh, wait, that's not on your label. That's the store selling it.
No, it's just in the store. Yeah.
I was so confused.
I mean, the label is still around. I mean, the store is way bigger than the label is. To be honest, there's so many people that, I mean, we have like 10 employees. Unfortunately, I would say the and not in a super negative way, the amount of people that work in the store, like, they're not necessarily connected to the label, even though the label exists.
Yeah,
it's still kind of like my thing.
How long has the store been there? And
the store has been in Philly since 2009. I'm just working towards like having a stronger presence in the store for the label, because we actually sell more. We sell 1 million times more records outside of the store. But if you walked in my store like right this second, like there isn't actually like a label section. So like I'm just like resetting that, and sort of like a time capsule, because I still have all the records. So
yeah, and then get beer taps.
Some stuff I only have like 10 or 15. Exactly. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, man, you should totally
use a beer tap. I don't know how to do that. I'm gonna look into that.
I mean, I think the thing is when you have a liquor license that costs more, but a beer license, or there actually here's another thing. There's these places in downtown where they don't sell you the beer per se, but
Right.
this could work
Right.
against you. But like my barber, where I go to get my haircut, you walk in, it doesn't
Right.
matter what
Yeah.
time, they have to offer you a beer when you walk in. They're like, oh, it's like 10 in the morning. You roll in a Saturday, like, oh, beer. You're like, yeah. And
Yeah.
they give you one, and you
Sure.
like sit there and walk around. So there could be that aspect where you like just roll with 30 packs here and there and be like, oh, you can get a beer, and then. But I think
Yeah.
getting beer in your place probably is cheaper. But again, Philly is a whole different animal than Raleigh, and we're in the South.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyone listening though, so
Sorry.
their address is 1050 North Hancock, right?
Yep.
Yep, and it's about
Yep.
it's next to the Piazza, and it's down the street from the Fillmore.
We're in the Piazza. We're
They're in-
actually in the Piazza. Yeah.
Okay, they're in the Piazza, and they're down the street from the Fillmore. And I didn't realize I've been driving by it for so long on 95. I used to take 95 down to
Really?
Delaware. Oh yeah, so I used to live in Morristown in Jersey before I moved to Raleigh, and my dad was living in Middletown, Delaware. So I used to take 95 to bypass the turnpike, and I used to take 95 down to 495 and go over and miss like the bridge and all that to go to Delaware. But for fucking years,
Right.
man, I've been driving by. It's like to the right is where you were off of 95. That's so funny. I mean, obviously,
wow.
I couldn't see it from there, but.
So what brought you to North Carolina?
My wife decided to leave me, so I sold everything and traveled, found Raleigh, and I liked Raleigh, so I decided to come back here after I was done traveling. And it reminded me of Portland and Austin without the massive amounts of people, which now are starting to move here, which is crazy. But it just seemed like a very chill,
Right.
like it just seemed very just laid back. It was just about what do you do? It's like, well, we kind of just drink and we eat, and there's a lot of tech startups, and my company is an animation company, so it just made sense to come down here. I dig it though. It's fucking cool. I mean, it's so funny being down here in this really easy to move around city, and then you go up to like I was visiting Philly a couple of years ago because my family, they all live up in like the Westchester area on my stepmom's side.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went to my cousin's wedding was right in the heart of Philly, right? What's that real popular place in Philly where it's like right on the same street as City Hall? It's whatever the main street is in Philly.
Rittenhouse.
It might be it. But yeah, they had like the fucking Philly. Who's the Philly dude who's from the baseball team, the mascot?
The Fanatic.
The Fanatic. Yeah, he like rolled into the wedding at the
Yeah.
the reception rolled around. I was like, wow, they're throwing some money on this thing. Looking back, would the you who started the label be happy with where it is today?
75%.
Yeah. What would the 25% like of unhappiness be from, or disappointment?
You get smarter. You made I made some bad turns. Nothing that affected me like irreversibly, but I mean, running a business is hard, and the music business is not necessarily good for your mental health, I'd say.
Really? It's just because of just random people shitting on you like they did with like the
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the whole model is like, like when you have a business, you run your business, you provide a service, you like this model has been skewed to the point where it's like, even, I mean, if you walked into our store right this second, you'd see this big place it's filled with stuff, and you'd see people in there and they're buying stuff, and you'd say, man, like, you're doing really well. Well, the markup on a new record is 30%. So what, even on a retail level, how many, it's like you're running a retail business with wholesale margins.
Wow.
And the wholesale end of the music world is 10 times worse than that. So, you have to really, really love what you're doing. And then if you combine that with like just the general sense of like dealing with artists and musicians,
Yeah.
it's a fine balancing act. I mean, it's like anything else, but I love playing guitar, and I like recording bands, and I like drinking beer. Um, it's like
Is there more money to be made?
it could be worse. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, we're not, I'm not selling insurance. Like I'm never like I've 100%, and I'm saying this not in a negative way. I've accepted the fact that I'm not going to be wealthy in my life, but you live the way you want to live, and you do what you want to do, and just trying to make the best of it, and be happy for like the opportunities that you have.
Yeah.
Which I've had a lot. So I'm not. I wouldn't be able to sit here and bullshit with you for a couple hours if I led a boring life.
That's the wealth. That's the wealthy part that people don't realize. It's like, yeah, if you work for yourself, there's times where I've gone like 2 months where no clients have hired me, and I'm like, okay, the bank
Right.
account's definitely draining right now.
What the
But then
fuck? Yeah.
but then I think that then I'll go, okay, well, but also I'm able to just break off and do all these other things without anyone telling me like, hey, where are you, or you have to sit at this desk all day. I have complete freedom.
Sure.
I think there's a price to that, where I feel like I'm
Yeah.
maybe not aging
No,
as fast as certain people around me.
I think that if you sat down and actually like examine that, you'd realize that like I mean just like look at yourself in a couple years, because you're like this sounds like really really cheesy to say, but like you're right at the age where like things are actually going to change around you, and people that are going to change around you, and like you see people when they like get in their 40s, they just like start swelling and they're like not happy,
Yeah.
and their bodies start failing them, and like you know
Yeah, I've been trying to keep a
um
mental note. I turned 40 next May, and I'm like, man, shit could easily just start falling apart. I better start eating
yeah,
more
but you know what
vegetables.
though, like yeah, you gotta watch out for like the pizza and stuff, but like I'll tell everybody, man, like I'm gonna be 45 next year, and like my life got better when I turned 40. I think I got to a point where I just like stopped, like my brain slowed down a little bit, like to the point where I wasn't like over analyzing every little thing and driving myself crazy about like dumb shit.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, personally, like I hadn't been able to have like a stable relationship with another person, and until I turned 40, like literally until I was like, oh yeah, like this is like, I don't know if it's just because like, oh yeah, I might be dead soon, or I don't know what, but I definitely like at first, I'm telling you, like I was 34 years old from the time I was 34 until I was probably 39.
Interesting.
Like when somebody would be like, hey, Eric, how old are you? I'm 34. You know, and I look 34 until I hit 40. So, but it was like, oh yeah, I'm 34. No, I wasn't even conscious of like lying. Like, I met a girl who was like 25 at Riot Fest, and she was cool. And I remember she's like, so how old are you anyway? I was like, I'm 34. I'm like 37. And I remember thinking like, why did I just lie about that? There's no need to lie about this. That's the stupidest thing I've ever said.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks later, she was like, well, you're 34. I'm like, oh, I'm 37. She's like, why would you lie about that? I have no idea why I lied about it. It was the dumbest thing ever.
She's like, that's hot. You're old.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother realm. But yeah, I think that there was a change in my whole psyche, like when I was just like, I can be 40. I'm fucking 40. Who cares?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, I'm not dyeing my hair anymore. I'm 40.
Yeah, man.
I
I
still
think
play guitar.
I like that. I think that people, it's like, it's funny as you're talking about that. I'm like looking at my own life, thinking, I mean, I pretty much live my own way, and I've definitely, I mean, worked for myself since like 2006. I've been freelancing, and then like really worked for myself since 2012, because I wasn't working for certain clients that would have me consistently come in, and my head was always spinning until probably this year, where it was, you have to hustle and do this stuff. And this past year, I really just sat back and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, this is fucking stupid. I'm driving myself crazy, and like I'm trying so fast to get to some place that I don't even realize where I'm trying to go to. So when you said that, I was kind of like, man, that it's like I've already felt like that, but they kind of made it more clear to me, like, yeah, like really, everyone's trying to go so fast, but there's a certain age where you stop and you're like, well, okay, did I get to quote unquote there? Did it really matter that I was
Yeah.
so stressed out about shit? And oh, look at me, I look distraught because I was so stressed out about shit that really didn't work for my physical being. No. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
I literally started thinking of the Jealous Sound song. There's Hope for Us.
Yeah. That's funny because I was actually just thinking of like Knapsack when we were talking about like being old, because I was like, they're older than me.
I Yeah. No, I interviewed Blair yesterday for the episode right before yours.
Oh, okay. He stayed at my house when I was 20.
Really?
Like, and I wasn't yeah, Knapsack stayed at my house, like, and I wasn't old enough to go to their show, and I was really mad. And then and then I got their record, like, because the record wasn't out yet. They had just like signed to Alias, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got their record like 6 months after they were at my house. I was like, the band's actually really good, and I couldn't even go to the show. I mean, I saw him like a year later, but
You'll probably like his interview. It's really interesting. Actually, I interviewed Sergi from Sam I Am before him. It's interesting.
oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, their take on things is pretty interesting. They're kind of like, yeah, like, we never really had it figured out. We kind of just played, and we probably could have. It's like they're like, yeah, our stage show was kind of and it's just a really interesting conversation. But okay, so to wrap this up, what would you like the people listening to know? Like, what would you like to plug?
Well, we're still making records. Creep is still making records. If you're in Philly, come to the store. I'm in a band. My band's called God Damn It. I don't need to plug anything. It's not a big deal.
So this is how I end every show with this question. So what scene ethics do you still hold on to this day?
That's a good one. Scene ethics. I don't know if this makes sense, but I don't want to conform to like what people think I should like in terms of like music, and like, so maybe that's why I always end up starting anything like this talking about hip hop or something. But I think that there's an over sense of people trying to be like accepted in our scene. I don't know if I know how to explain this, but I never really wanted to look a certain way. You know what I mean? I never really cared about like anything like related to like fashion or anything like that. I think that now that like everyone's so into like taking pictures and like Instagram and all that stuff, like some of that has like overshadowed like a lot of the music. I mean, sometimes it's hard, but like, I just try and like not let a lot of that like influence like whether I like something. I'm trying to like stick to songs and not like what kind of music it is, or is this like XYZ kind of punk rock or hardcore or...
Yeah, I mean, your answer's your answer, dude. There's no right answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's but I still have like, in the same breath, I just went and saw like the Bouncing Souls play their like summer Christmas in July show and got super nostalgic, and I was like, when everything else sucks, there's always going to be the Bouncing Souls.
Yeah, they have a new band out too. Two of the members of the band are doing a band with Ari from Lifetime.
I mean, Lifetime's still like relevant.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. Actually,
I still listen to a lot of the same records that came out like 20 years ago. So that's if there is a downfall to my existence, I mean, it's just like, somebody was like, the year's 1997 and this is this and this is this and blah 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 blah, and I was like, I feel like that was yesterday. So
no, I feel the same way. That's how I can remember so many things. I feel like I never really, not like I still live there where I haven't grown up, but I still mentally feel that stuff, and it just kept with me. It's almost like I keep it in a suitcase with me at all times.
Sure. No, I think that we learned a lot, like, in that time period. Like, I also think that, I don't know if you noticed in the last like probably like 5 years or so that there's like this like 90s resurgence, and that's why all these bands, like, I mean, Sam I Am plays to like 10 times as many people as they played to like 15 years ago or more. And I think that a big part of that is that, like, that period of time, like in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, like it was actually like a really important time for music, and just like growing. I don't know if it was just because it was the end of like the physical CDs, and just like the way people like, I don't know if it was just the end before social media came in and like MySpace or whatever, but I look back on that and I remember like thinking like, oh, like people wrote letters to each other, and you'd be like, oh, well, I want to go to New Jersey because I'm going to see these people, or I'm going to go to like this town because we would go on tour to like hang out with our friends. And I think that like a lot of younger people are like, what was it like back then, like when there was this or that, and it's like, oh, well, it was actually like this. Like, oh, that's so cool. And in the back of my head I'm like, well, it is cool, but I just remember it being like normal. So